Alright, so here's the same system as before, although I had to make a few little modifications because, well, it gets hot. It gets hot. So we have the yellow wire coming out, which goes to the K-type thermocouple, which we got a high temperature one that's good to 1,000 degrees. The other one was good to 600, and well, it didn't like it. So we did a test run, and what happened was, even though the element barely touches the floor, it's just on 3 little support brackets, I guess you'd call them, on the element, and you should have no real convection because there's no air in the vacuum chamber, and there's very, very little contact area for conduction. I was hoped that the radiant heat wouldn't be enough to cause problems, but that's where I was wrong. It must be glowing pretty red in there because at 900 degrees the whole can got hot, and eventually the hose going into the vacuum chamber melted off, and the vacuum pump was getting some pretty hot air. So it's got kale wool now, and a K-type thermocouple that's good to 1,000 centigrade, and you can see that although they're high temperature wires, they're not loving it, but they are doing the job. And where it comes out of the vacuum chamber, it now goes into an aluminum reservoir, which is just a leftover piece from one of the oxygen generators, and that way it gives time for the air that's getting pulled out by the vacuum pump to cool down, and anything that's going to deposit any vapors. I was surprised by the amount of vapors that come off. You can see them sort of forming clouds inside the vacuum chamber as it's getting heated up. So that's sort of where we are now. But I've had one successful run, and we're going to see if we can do it again. Alright, here we are. Not the most accurate scale, but this will give you an idea of how much zeolite you get. I mean, there's a decent size Ziploc bag. And we'll weigh it with the nut off. So remember, well, let's do it with the nut on, and we'll standardize how it should be when it's easier for me to remember. Okay, so it's got a nut on there, we're good. I'm going to pour the zeolite in. Just need a round number here, 2270 grams. And we will see what that turns out to be after we've done some cooking. I don't know if this is the best way of attaching a probe, but it seems to work pretty good, actually. Got no complaints. At least I know it's not going to fall off. And that element, for a cheap, crappy thing, it seems to do the 900 degrees just fine. There is an O-ring seal I made along here, but it doesn't really fit the lid very well. So we're just going to put a bit of electrical tape on here. And the temperature doesn't seem to get so high that it affects it. Anyhow, that gives you a pretty good idea of what we'll be seeing in a minute. Let's get this going. Let's get a vacuum on this thing first, and then we don't have to worry about the zeolite getting cooked with an atmosphere. That'll make sure that we have no vacuum leaks. The multimeter is just taking the temperature of the atmosphere inside the vacuum chamber. It's not actually connected to anything, it's just in there loose. see how well it holds the vacuum. So we're not fighting leaks too much. That's acceptable. We'll crank this on. And so, as is mentioned in the comments, the SSR, the solid state relay, they can freeze in the closed position, which would allow it to sort of run away on you. So what I've done is I've installed a light, an audible visual light there, and set the alarm. It's set to 900, so as soon as it goes 4 degrees past its set point temperature, the alarm will go off. And the alarm is going to set it to this. And you'll hear it's fairly annoying. Really good little programmable units. So as soon as it goes a few degrees over, that's what we'll be hearing. We'll make it 5 degrees above. Takes a second for it to figure out what it's doing. Back to the set point, temperature, amperage, voltage, temperature inside, and just out of screen. We're about 24 inches of mercury vacuum so far. There you go. So we're 888 degrees. Vacuum's at 25 inches, and inside the vacuum chamber you can see it's glowing hot. A lot of radiant heat, but with no air in there and it almost not touching the sides, there's almost no conduction or convection. So the outside of the pot is just hot on the lid where it's getting a bit of the radiant heat, but down here it's still cold like the rest of the shop. So if I put a bit of insulation around the edge of the pot, we could really just maintain that heat in the bottom section. But yeah, it's pretty warm in there. It's just coming up on 905 right now. Alright, we're almost at the full temperature. Now this one's just reading a temperature, the thermocouple is probably within sight of the radiant heat, and it's just picking up the temperature inside, within sight of the element. We're just sneaking up on 930 degrees, and we're going to just see if it overshoots, but it looks like it's clicking on and off the relay and sneaking up on those last 4 or 5 degrees. So that's pretty good. It's quite neat how it learns the element. It'll try the element and the temperature, and sort of, it's like walking blindly through a room and touching and feeling around. When you first put it on, it takes longer to get up the temperature, and after it's learned that element, it seems to just get up there right away and slow down right at the last minute, like it's sneaking up on a stop sign, you know. But it'll end up getting up to 929.5, and it's going to work super hard to keep it there. But I think for all intents and purposes, we can say that we are up to temperature, and we are up to vacuum. And now we just let it sit for a few hours. And we'll go take a look at the clouds. There's clouds inside the vacuum chamber. Super cool. Yeah, so just a few things to think about with the vacuum pump. Now, I did melt a hose off, like I was saying, last run, and I've put insulation on there, which has helped keep the shell of the vacuum chamber cooler. And although it's 930 degrees the pot, and 624 degrees with just in the surrounding area of the vacuum chamber, these are still cold to the touch. And one of the things I tried last time was I turned the vacuum pump on and off, and I'd let the vacuum fluctuate a little bit just so that the vacuum pump didn't have to run all the time. But what it does is it allows a little bit of atmosphere to enter the vacuum chamber, and then when you turn on the vacuum pump, of course, it sucks out that atmosphere, but that atmosphere has the ability to get up to temperature of the surrounding, 616 degrees of the atmosphere within the chamber. So it's important to keep the vacuum pump all the time on, so that the amount of air you're pulling out of the chamber, if there's any leaks or anything gassing off in the zeolite, there's not any significant amount going through here into the vacuum pump itself. The other thing is, leaks are awesome with vacuum systems, because if there's a leak somewhere, you just put some putty or tape on it, and it makes the leak go away. But you can see how nicely the PID is keeping that temperature at a steady 930 degrees. It'll vary a degree, maybe one way or another, but great technology, man. Great technology. And cheap. I mean, under $100. So a lot easier than... And now I can run it on the kiln or whatever. Run it in any of the... anything you want to heat up or cool down, and it'll do the job. Just plug it in and go. Alright. That's 2 hours at full temperature and full vacuum. So we're going to shut off the temperature and let it cool down for probably an hour. Keep the vacuum on it. And then later on today I'll weigh it and we'll see what she does. Alright. Whether this tells us anything or not, it's hard to say. Let's see what she weighs now. It's been cooling for a few hours. So 130 grams of something is not in the zeolite, whether that's just all moisture or contaminants or who knows what, but 130 grams is about 130 grams. Thanks for watching.